Hi, welcome back to the Startup Operators Weekly Roundup. The Weekly Roundup is a show for people who like to stay updated on the major developments of the Indian startup ecosystem. So if you're new to the podcast, please do consider subscribing to it and sharing it with your operator friends who you think will enjoy the show. In today's episode, we'll be talking about some of the clarifications which RBI has put forth with regards to the transaction fees to be levied in UPI. And along with that, Sequoia also announced its latest cohort, the 7th cohort of its Surge startups. Also, India's insurance regulator has come up with a proposal to set up a platform for the sale, servicing and claims of insurance policies and much more. So yeah, let's get started. Roshan, the Asia Cup is underway and tonight we have the match between India and Pakistan. What are your predictions for it?
Obviously, I'd love for India to win. But, over the years, I think the India-Pakistan match intensity has gone away. I was just telling this to a friend of mine as well, that as a 90s kid, it used to be a thing, right? India-Pakistan match means, everything else would come to a halt. But for some reason, I don't know. I don't get it. Maybe I'm past that age or whatever, right? But yeah, a few good things from last week. Dr. Jaishankar, who's the External Affairs Minister, is in Argentina on a 2-day tour. And there was discussion of exporting the LCA Tejas to Argentina, right? Which is fantastic. We talked about the Defense Acquisition Council and developing that indigenous defense ecosystem here. And this is a move to in that regard, right? Being able to actually export, given that we're one of the leading importers of defense equipment as such. That's really wonderful, I would say.
And this is all of these conversations you have in your other podcast, Bharat Varta, right?
Yeah. So if you guys are interested about politics, policy and culture focused on India, we look at things from a very indigenous lens. Do check out Bharat Varta as well. We're available on all platforms. Over to some startup news for today.
And that's how you plug in another podcast.
Correct.
Last week in the roundup, Roshan and I spoke about some charges that might be introduced for UPI transactions. But on that front, the Finance Ministry has issued a clarification stating that there is no consideration to levy charges for UPI payments. The ministry, in a series of tweets, said that UPI is a digital public good with immense convenience for the public and productivity gains for the economy. There is no consideration in government to levy any charges for UPI services. The concerns of service providers for cost recovery have to be met through other means. Now, the reason why this confusion started in the first place is because in a press release which was dated August 17th, RBI had asked for feedback on a discussion paper which was titled Charges and Payments Systems. Now, this broadly encompasses all the various charges which are levied by banks today for all money transfers, which includes the likes of NEFT, RTGS, IMPS and so on. But for UPI, while there have been rumors and there have been a lot of discussions of how banks will be monetizing or even break even, government has come forward and clarified that there will be no such charges. All of the reimbursements will be borne by the government. It's very good to see that the government is calling it out in the public that UPI is a public digital goods service, which essentially means that it is a fundamental need in the society. Yeah. But going forward, how do you think such a model will be sustainable if consumers or banks are not being charged for the convenience?
So few different things, right? It's amazing that, the finance minister herself, Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman ji, has come out and clarified on this, right? That shows how integral UPI is to India's economy itself, right? The fact that she's come out and said, hey, no, we have no plans of monetization as yet. See, if we back up a little bit, right? UPI, who's picking up the cost for it? Someone has to pick up the cost for it, right? And right now, it's all the banks who are picking it up in terms of enabling it, maintaining those systems and whatnot. But really, when you look at it in perspective of the Indian economy, it's a drop in the ocean, right? It is significant and it will have to be borne by someone, but I feel like the government can raise money through some other means to sort of fund this, especially given that it can have so many second order effects, right? And UPI is deeply embedded into a lot of service delivery schemes that we have as well, whether it's the Atal Pension Yojana or, a key part of the whole Jan Dhan Aadhar mobile movement as well on financial inclusion and so on. So definitely we're not going to go back. And obviously we're not going to get to a point where we're going to charge for the transactions or even a fixed fee anytime soon, right? For sure. But I think in the future, if there is such a cost, I think we will have progressed to such an extent that, perhaps, it will cause a minor dent, but not too much anyway. So you're seeing that every month, literally there's a newer transaction record, right? Between 21 and 22, I think, we've doubled in terms of volume and number of transactions, and which is phenomenal, right? For a country like India. And if it keeps going like this in that classic exponential way, we could see a point where, almost near 80-90% or 100% of our transaction could be UPI based, right? And that's a massive leverage. You're talking about formalization at an unprecedented scale, how it sort of integrates with everything else that's been happening, whether it's on the GST front or all of these large population level schemes that have been announced and so on. So yeah, I really feel that they can fund the 1,000 crores or maybe like more through some alternate means, I would say.
But also, it's not the first time where, a group of operators have been approaching the government asking for help on how to recover costs. Right? We've seen this earlier back in 2014 or 15, if I remember correctly, when the whole net neutrality became a buzzword, right? Telecom operators had approached the regulators saying that, hey, we're putting up towers and paying for the spectrum, but it is the service providers, like for example, Facebook and YouTube and internet companies who are using the bandwidth. And considering that nowadays multimedia takes up such a huge part of the bandwidth, other companies are facing a crunch of it, right? That's why telecom operators approach regulators saying that, hey, we should be charging for what sort of websites consumers are visiting.
Yeah, I mean, see, this is a very contentious topic again in terms of net neutrality, right? And if you look at it purely as a market person or a libertarian sense of things, right? I mean, you will say that, hey, I mean, obviously, if someone is putting up all the infrastructure, the towers and whatnot, I mean, they should have the discretion to charge alternately for different services and whatnot, right? I mean, it seems fair. But then see, the internet is such an enabling mechanism, right? I mean, you have seen, especially over the last couple of years, whether it's education or commerce or whatever else, health and so on, has been powered by the internet. So at this point of time, the government has rightly identified internet and internet payments as a public utility. It's so key and critical for the nation's development that we'll have to figure an alternate way to sort of fund these developments and investments and so on, right? I mean, but even with all of that, I mean, we had a blockbuster 5G auction, right? Yeah. Because even the companies know that the headroom for growth in India is massive.
They expect by 2025, 50% of the country will be under 5G coverage. I think that's a very big milestone.
That's amazing because, see, we're only scratching the surface in terms of remote being part of a flattened world as such, right? I mean, so if you look at that, Thomas Friedman quote, from the 90s that, the world is flat. He said that in context of outsourcing, globalization and everything. I think remote further flattened the world, and with 5G and virtualization and everything, we will see again a further flattening of the world, right? I mean, think about what it can do for services. If you can teach yoga over Zoom screen right now to someone in Boston or LA or wherever, I mean, think about what will happen if you are able to project 3D images to different places. Think about healthcare, for example, right? I mean, if we can have Indian doctors perform surgeries elsewhere and so on. I mean, you're looking at a phenomenal number of opportunities, I would say.
Yeah. Well, also the RBI is only seeking public feedback on the larger issue of payment system and charges.
That's an important point. See, it's a suggestion. It's a discussion paper, right? I mean, people got really hot and bothered about it. Rightly so, because UPI is important, but it's just a suggestion paper.
Yeah. Also, the Smart India Hackathon is currently being conducted across the country, and this is part of the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav celebrations. The Ministry of Education's Innovation Cell and AICTE has identified 75 higher educational institutions and incubators as Smart India Hackathon nodal centers to host. During the grand finale, the student teams work around the clock under the guidance of mentors and industry and ministry representatives to produce the working solutions for the selected problem statements. This Smart India Hackathon is also acclaimed to be the world's largest open innovation model. Now, for startups, especially early stage startups or even like startups in the prototype stage, it gives a great platform for them to work with enterprises and companies in sandbox environments and actually test out their products. And this is also acclaimed to be one of the world's biggest open innovation models. A couple of roundups back, Roshan, we were talking about maybe the water of IIT Madras is different considering the great variety of startups that have been founded there. But, with competitions like the Smart India Hackathon, I'm pretty sure there's so much more different types of ideas that can come out, especially because you're providing a nationwide platform to students from schools and colleges to actually practice and implement whatever they're learning today.
See, I think people of my generation will recognize, right? I mean, for the longest time, we said that, all of our problems, whether it's poverty, corruption, etc., were all pinned down to population, right? I mean, hey, we just had too many people here, and that's what caused all of these problems, and which is why India was so underdeveloped and so on. I would say we are first starting to realize the true demographic dividend on some of these things, right? I mean, the fact that we have the youngest population in the world, right?
The demographic proportions are changing right now.
Correct. And the fact that it's going to be this way for another 20 years, at least 20, 30 years, which is a huge dividend. And, schemes and competitions like this will surface innovation from the near and far in the country, right? You always have to democratize the really hard problems to a wider base, and hackathons like this are really going to help students being able to engage industry in cohesion with whatever they're learning. Means that, there'll be a tangible reality to whatever they're learning, right? I mean, often, we've been in class where, we've read about something abstract, we've heard about something abstract, but we don't know how it translates to in reality. I love the fact that, we're focused on builders, right? We're focused on helping the younger generation build as soon as possible and learn and iterate and experiment and all of those things. Considering that, it's come from the highest levels, from the Prime Minister onwards, it's a fantastic initiative.
Yeah, I think Prime Minister Modi also addressed the entire cohort.
People often underestimate how much of a signaling importance it is, right? The fact that, the central government talks about these things, not just the central government, even
state
any kind of government.
Or even like corporates are
Yeah.
very much active in this. We have seen them set up a lot of accelerator programs, sandbox environments to try out new projects.
People underestimate how important of a signaling device this is. The fact that it's become somewhat aspirational right now to start up, right? I mean, it didn't happen just overnight with a flip of a switch, right? I mean, it happens through multiple such initiatives, multiple such encouragement and support from the government and folks above.
Yeah, I mean, like even back in school when I was graduating from my school and I used to have conversations with my family that, hey, you know what, maybe I want to work in a startup and all. The instant reply which I used to get, hey, no, work for something like Cognizant or an Infosys, because that was considered to be safe. But right now, they have matured so much, and right now people are actually aspiring to either start a company or work in a fast growth startup.
Absolutely.
And on that note, Sequoia Surge, which is Sequoia India's and Southeast Asia's rapid scale-up program, they have launched its 7th cohort of startups, which featured 37 founders across 15 early stage startups. A third of the startups included in the list have at least one female founder, and several startups are there which have second or third time founders. Surge startups have had a great track record, having produced companies like Scalar Academy, Khatabook, Atlan and Plum. Companies which have scaled up from the Surge program have raised over $1.7 billion in follow-on funding, with over 60% of them from the first 5 cohorts raising the Series A and beyond. They are very stellar kind of a list of companies like Scalar, Atlan, the ones I just mentioned. And even from this latest list, I think there are companies like Attentive and all.
Yeah, that's a fantastic track record. I mean, just given the follow-on funding and as well, right? I mean, but that's obvious also because Sequoia has funded some legendary companies, right? And they've done amazing work in India and Southeast Asia. So building that sort of a community at an early stage itself has been really beneficial for the ecosystem itself. Since 2019, they've been running these cohorts, and you mentioned, Plum, Atlan, Dukaan, Scalar, all of these folks have, we've interviewed all of these folks on the podcast. I mean, I just realized, and they're doing fabulously well, right? So this is amazing. This is wonderful. So there are some interesting names from the newer batch. I saw Attentive is building vertical SaaS, which I think is a growing phenomena, right? I mean, I think that the age of horizontal large SaaS is going to get splintered. I think we're going to see a lot of, for bankers, for lawyers, for advertisers kind of software emerging, which is kind of full stack and solves everything, right? I mean, and we have some experience with that. I mean, because we work for an enterprise vertical SaaS company as well with Vimo. So that is an interesting trend. So there are plenty of interesting startups across edtech, payments, and so on. I mean, I also saw climate tech, for example, which is actually gaining. A lot of folks are developing their thesis on that. So that's really going to be interesting, I would say.
So Roshan, for our first-time listeners and also, for operators and founders in the early stage startup phase, can you tell us a bit more as to what do startups gain by being part of, similar cohorts?
See, obviously, capital is the first big thing, right? I mean, it'll help folks, especially who are at the very, very early stage, perhaps, quit their day jobs and focus on the idea full time, right? I mean, that's a massive leverage. Aside from the capital itself, the fact that, hey, you have a structured program, right? I mean, you have accountability, because what happens in the early stages, there can be a certain amount of mission creep. You can feel like, hey, you're working and working and working without any milestones as such. So I think having a structured program where you perhaps have to demo every week or every fortnight and sign off on having to talk to X number of customers and develop your product to some extent and so on, right? I mean, I think that's very, very interesting. That's very, very helpful as well, especially for first-time founders, because they haven't been through that journey before. And then the fact that you have a community, right? I mean, the fact that, hey, you can talk to fellow founders, exchange notes on what's working for them, what they should do differently and so on. The fact that, hey, you have a common pool that You can perhaps exchange some help on consult, maybe get some advice on hiring and so on, right? I mean, that's massive thing. So Sequoia especially, I mean, has a enviable portfolio of every kind of startup, right?
It also
so imagine
gives great market access as well.
Exactly. So imagine leveraging all of these really amazing minds for the problems that you are solving. So I think at the early stage, being part of a cohort, being part of an accelerator or a program is super beneficial. It's unanimously beneficial. I've not talked to anyone who's come out of this program saying that, hey, it wasn't the best use of my time and so on. So for sure, I mean, if you are at the early stage, I think you should definitely evaluate some of these programs. Don't sweat the equity stuff. I mean, I think at this point, most of them have very reasonable sort of offers. I mean, it is not 2011 or 2012. So yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, and also in our podcast, we do interview guests from a wide variety of fields. And if you have any specific questions that you would like us to ask them, do let us know in the comments below.
Interestingly, UPECA has also announced its latest, or rather, I mean, they're calling for applications, I think. So if you're building a SaaS startup and you want some help from the brightest minds in SaaS, then do reach out to UPECA, run by Prasanna and Tyagu, both of whom we've had on the podcast talking about SaaS, and they specialize in this value SaaS, right? Value SaaS over vanity SaaS. No binaries in terms of, hey, being bootstrapped or being funded, but rather building a sustainable business and having more optionality for founders, right? So do check out their program as well. We'll link it in the description.
Also moving on, in a recent study by NASSCOM, Deeptech startups in India has raised over $2.7 billion in venture funding in 2021, and they now account for over 12% of the country's overall startup ecosystem. Deeptech includes, companies which are working in the fields of newest technologies like AI, machine learning, IoT, big data, quantum computing, robotics, etc. There were over 319 deals in 2021, and that was a growth of 1.6x year on year. Besides the organic growth of the ecosystem through the decade, deep tech startups are now being quoted by organizations and enterprises as well, as they look to build niche tech capabilities and expand their product portfolio on their path of digital transformation. Now, this also provides a great opportunity for some of these companies to work directly with enterprises solving real-life market problems. But it's not all green. There are certain challenges like the dearth of good talent, access to seed capital, and go-to-market opportunities. But as we just discussed, these cohorts are a great way to overcome many of these. You have spoken to a lot of deep tech founders in the podcast. How do you see this community maturing over time?
Yeah, so we've had a fair few deep tech startups on the podcast. Check out this amazing conversation with Ashwini Asokan of Match Street Den. She speaks about the various nuances of building a deep tech startup. We've had a couple of drone startups, Aarav Unmanned Systems, Idea Forge. Again, started out of the dorm room in college. Both of them have been building for 10 plus years in a very nascent ecosystem. And a science startup as well, right? String Bio. LL Subayan is an amazing founder. She moved from Silicon Valley to Bangalore to kind of build here.
Once you're forgetting one of the most futuristic startups also we have interviewed.
Ultra Human?
Yes.
Of course, Ultra Human as well. Shout out to Mohit and the team. So yeah, I mean, we've had all of these folks, and I realized that the talent here is par anywhere else, right? I think in the Talk of the Town section, we're going to talk about talent specifically, but we have the talent. I mean, we've been graduating, 10 lakh plus engineers for a while now, right? It's just that, we haven't had the capital. So we're starting to see a little more patient capital right now enter the ecosystem, the early signs of it. The fact is that, look, I mean, you can't iterate as quickly at such a low cost with hardware or deep tech as such, right? I mean, it's very hard. It's really hard. Drones, for example, I was talking to Vipul of Aarav Unmanned Systems, and he talks about, how it was such a hard time. I mean, given that the capital was scarce and the fact that they had to make the drone work and everything. I mean, it's very tough to iterate. The second thing is, finding that go-to-market, right? I mean, finding a nice, easy go-to-market as such, which, we delved upon specifically with Ashwini Asokan as well, and who's done a fabulous job of finding that need in the market and then going after it and solving it very well with Vue and with Brex as well. Again, finding the go-to-market is hard. And finally, on the talent front, yeah, I mean, sure, we're graduating 10 lakh engineers, every year, but how many of these folks will be of the types who are, the embedded system types or, IoT or, any of the core engineering stuff, I mean, it's definitely hard, but I think things are improving, and I'm really optimistic for the fact that ecosystem is developing. The fact that, ISRO, DRDO, all these organizations are again open to working with startups is a very positive sign. I mean, we're going to see a lot more deep tech innovation in India.
Well, talking about government organizations, the Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority of India has proposed setting up a new platform for the sale, servicing, and claims of insurance policies. All products from life, general, and standalone health insurers will be listed on this proposed platform. This platform will definitely help insurance penetration in tier 2 and 3 areas and also bring down the cost of existing commission rates. And most likely, IRDAI plans to roll out the platform by the end of December this year. We have discussed like what challenge it is to drive last mile financial inclusivity, and right now we are seeing the insurance regulator itself trying to create a platform to drive that inclusion in the insurance space.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
So it's a hard challenge, right? And an even harder challenge than perhaps, I mean, financial inclusion, I would say, right? And, insurance penetration in India, again, I mean, going by what, statistic you look at, it's somewhere around 10-15%, which is not that great. And we've spoken oftentimes about the out-of-pocket expenses. A lot of families are just, perhaps one illness or one really big expense away from abject poverty. That is a massive challenge, right? And with Ayushman Bharat, we've made some progress on that front. But still, I mean, there's a long way to go, right? And the last couple of years, 2-3 years, although we've been growing, we've not been growing at the required pace as such. And it's really important to get that coverage in tier 2, tier 3 cities as well. So IRDAI has that one very big mandate, which is, increasing insurance penetration. And this is a game changer, right? I mean, this is an absolute game changer, because what essentially IRDAI has said is that, hey, the agents can register on a particular portal themselves and will be able to sell across products, right? I mean, they don't have to be tied to a particular let's say product line or a particular carrier or company as such, which means that, there will be a greater trust for these agents to go out and sell different kinds of products and sell to more people as well. So that's pretty amazing. Also, on the other side of things, right? I mean, I think this portal will also be like a single window for claims and servicing. Now, claims and servicing is a very complex and ambiguous process. It's very opaque, and simplifying that will inspire confidence in consumers on insurance itself. I was watching, Mr. Devashish Panda, who's the head of the IRDAI, talk on a television show, and he seems like a very forward-thinking person, right? I mean, he seems really geared more towards development than regulation, right? And he said, look, there is no, you have to balance both of those, right? And one thing I really liked was, he said, we will think of it more in terms of principles than rules, and we will define boundary conditions, right? So we don't have to, approve every product. I mean, we can have a broad-based sort of a rule and, in terms of what carriers should do and should not do. Few different things on the insurance side of things, and, you mentioned financial inclusion and what's worked on banking side that could actually work on the insurance side. I think we need to see all kinds of insurance players, right? I mean, small, medium, large. On the banking side, NBFCs, for example, fintechs. I mean, these have been really helpful, right? I mean, to cover that last mile. We need to see like a similar initiative as the Jandan Aadhaar Mobile for the insurance, right? I mean, something on the technology front which can cover that last mile with that government level support as well. So these are a couple of things that can definitely improve. I do believe that this is a positive trend in terms of having a portal where agents are registered and so on. So hopefully, I mean, it should be up by December at least.
December,
I think. Yeah, great stuff.
Also, there's another report which was released by stockapps.com, which states that out of the 5 major digital firms, Google harvests the most data on its users by tracking 39 different types of private data for each user. This should not be a surprise given that their entire business model relies on data. Facebook, most of the data they store is information which users themselves enter. Apple is in a league above Amazon in protecting user privacy, and it is the most privacy conscious firm out there. Apple only stores the information that is necessary to maintain users' accounts. But now that we have been seeing the likes of Meta and all coming in, and recently I came across this Meta patent where in the metaverse they plan on tracking eyeball movement to show ads to the users and also track how much time they're spending viewing a single ad. Right. Now, with such level of tracking, how do you think things will pan out, considering we have been speaking about data protection bills and all?
Right. See, people say privacy is a myth. I think privacy is a luxury, right? Most people, 99% of the people, they exchange privacy for convenience, right? I mean, we do it.
We use Gmail products.
We use multiple products. I mean, there are worse products out there that we use. I mean, hundreds of apps, hundreds of portals and whatnot that we've registered, we've forgotten about, that we're reminded sometime when they change their terms of service, and we don't even look at those emails, right? So I think, our generation, at least, we're living in a post-privacy world. But for the younger generation, considering that, so much of their life is online. There is no duality between online and offline for them. Some kind of data protection and everything is really, really important. In fact, I posed this exact same question to Ranjan of Bureau as well, and he had an interesting answer to that. So definitely check out that episode which we'll publish this week.
Talking about Facebook, in a recent conversation with Joe Rogan on a podcast, Mark Zuckerberg admitted that Facebook actively suppressed a controversial expose on the US President Joe Biden's son a week ahead of the 2020 elections. This news was suppressed by Facebook as the following a directive from the FBI to contain election misinformation. An abandoned laptop by Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son, had details of him using his father's influence when Joe Biden was a vice president in the Obama administration to seal a deal with an Ukrainian businessman. The story was met with skepticism by most mainstream media organizations, as the evidence could not be verified by any other parties. I think Twitter at that point had blocked any form of sharing of that article, but Facebook, until it was verified by third-party checkers, they allowed sharing it to an extent. But this also kind of raises a lot of questions against what sort of power social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook have, especially as we're moving on to election times.
Yeah, at this point of time, I don't think anyone really doesn't believe that Facebook or Twitter or any of the big tech guys don't influence elections and so on, right? They do massively, right? And whether by accident or whether by intent, they do. So this came out in a Joe Rogan podcast, which I'm actually yet to catch, where he interviews Mark Zuckerberg. I sometimes feel for Zuck because think about it, he's just a college dropout who created by accident the world's most powerful platform and became one of the most powerful men on the planet, right? And that's the kind of crazy responsibility that I don't know anyone who can perhaps handle. And he's been doing it for 18 years now, right? And still going strong and still enthusiastic about it. Now, my concern with this whole algorithm thing is that the FBI perhaps told you that you should not promote misinformation, but what you choose as misinformation is again discretionary, right? It's discretionary to Facebook in terms of choosing this particular thing as misinformation or even for Twitter and the others, right? And here they hire a bunch of fact checkers to sort of analyze, and multiple threads on Twitter in terms of who these fact checkers are, what their political leanings are, and so on. I doubt we will ever get it right. I doubt we'll ever get the right balance, but at this point of time, it's entirely skewed, is the broad consensus, right? Looking at some of these folks. It's again, developing sort of a challenge. With greater tech, you're going to have greater complexities on how to regulate and everything. And perhaps, sometime in the future, we will be wiser about what to do about this. But at this point of time, it's a reality that we have to face, and we'll have to be very tactical about such things, I would say. So the one antidote to some of this stuff is for these folks to open source their algorithms, right? Which they will never do, right? Because that's the secret sauce and that is proprietary to them. But that's the only way that I see a solution for this. You think about even something less egregious like election fraud, right? Forget about election fraud and stuff, right? The fact that hey, you could have 5,000 followers, but those 5,000 people could never end up seeing your post. Or they might see one post of yours, but not the other. No. I think general folks need to understand what the criteria is, right? You built up a following of 15, 20,000 subscribers. At the very least, I think you need to understand, what posts will reach whom, right? So we'll see all of this, I think, in the days and years to come.
Alright, wrapping up this week's roundup, Survey5, which is the Mumbai-based device management support platform, led the funding charts last week. They raised $65 million as part of an ongoing Series D round, which is led by Singularity Growth Opportunities Fund. They have customers like Apple, Airtel, Samsung, OnePlus and the likes, and with this latest fundraise, they're looking to expand across geographies in Latin America and Japan. Tech-led on-demand work fulfillment platform A-Wing backed $15 million in a Series B funding round, which was led by Bertelsmann India Investments and Amicus Capital Partners. The enterprise-focused gig platform counts Infosys, Mahindra, Tata Group, Byju's and Upgrade among its clients. On the merger and acquisitions front, Binny Bansal-backed edtech platform BrightChamps announced the acquisition of Singapore-headquartered Scholar, which is a live learning platform for kids to gain communication and English skills. Now, this deal was a $15 million deal, which was transacted in cash and stock. The acquisition comes a little over 2 months after BrightChamps announced that it will invest $100 million to make edtech acquisitions across the US, UK, Middle East and North America, Southeast Asia and India in FY23. So this is exactly what you said in the last roundup, where we'll be seeing a lot of consolidation happening in the edtech space, and I think this will just keep on increasing.
the valuations are a lot more tempered, and I think, folks are just going to use the money that they have to buy up all of these startups and products and sort of grow inorganically as well, right? So I think that's par for the course. Servify is especially interesting, right? I mean, you've seen, how devices have become such an integral part of our life, and it's only going to improve more and more. Forget about mobile phones and watches and whatnot. I mean, you're going to see home automation systems and everything. And given all of these things, I mean, post sales service are key, right? I mean, in order for you to maintain that experience. So tying up with brands to sort of manage all of that, I think is a huge market. I myself, I mean, thanks to, I don't know if it was Servify or some other company, I had a warranty on my TV and that came good, right? I mean, I didn't have to replace my TV. The chip had gone kaput apparently, and yeah, I mean, I was thrilled to no end. And Avin, I think, competes with the likes of Apna. Again, blue collar workforce is evergreen problem, right? Given the size of India and the number of people that we have looking for employment as well. So yeah, fantastic stuff.
So Roshan, what do you have for us for the talk of town this week?
For the talk of town, we have an interesting tweet from Mike Solana. He is actually quote-tweeting another tweet which says, hey, CEO of Google, CEO of Microsoft, CEO of Adobe and so on, all of them are Indian, right? And he is actually quote-tweeted that saying CEO of Google, CEO of Microsoft, CEO of Adobe, Twitter, IBM, NetApp, etc. All of them are American, right? I mean, with the American flag. I think it was particularly interesting, right? I mean, see, not to be jingoistic about it, I think we should definitely take that essential quality of American life, that irrespective of who someone is, where they come from, what they do, etc. I mean, they have a chance to be the CEOs of all of these companies, for example, right? I mean, that's something that really have to borrow from American culture, right? The fact that, they respect hustle, they respect work, and that's something to absolutely take note of. It fills me with pride that, hey, we have a Sundar Pichai, we have a Satya Nadella and so on, right? I mean, because I feel like, there is a certain civilizational ethos, there is an Indian mind, right, that enables such genius, that enables such progress and everything, that we feel that, okay, I mean, if these folks can go out and do such amazing things, right, they can do these things here as well if we fix the environment, right? I mean, so I look at it from that perspective. I read this tweet very positively that yes, they're American citizens, but it also means that, hey, we should learn how we can do what America does in sort of integrating all these folks from the various parts of the globe to become fantastic contributors to the country.
So Roshan, you also mentioned that you spoke with Ranjan of Bureau, right? Tell us a bit more about the conversation and when it'll be out.
Upcoming episodes for this week, I mentioned Ranjan of Bureau. I think it's a very interesting sort of a business. They're building the pre-check, or think of it as the PSA for the internet. They're verifying these users through various signals and helping organizations prevent fraud and also build more profitable user base, right? So fantastic episode with Ranjan. I mean, he's a second-time entrepreneur, has been at the game long enough and spoke really well. And again, sorry to have not put out the Praval episode last week, but yeah, this week for sure. This week for sure we'll have the Praval episode out. It was a fantastic chat. Really, I mean, all things marketing, all things SaaS. Zoho has 50 plus products, 55 products. They operate in, I think, 70, 80 countries across the world. And it just boggles my mind in terms of how they're able to streamline their marketing. So yeah, I mean, it was truly a masterclass with Praval. So do check it out.
And to know when the episodes will be out, please keep an eye out on our social feeds on Twitter and LinkedIn. On Twitter, we are at Operator Startup, and on LinkedIn, you can follow the Startup Operator page. Please don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoyed this conversation and to consider subscribing to our channel. Also, if you like this, updates will be delivered straight into your WhatsApp inbox. Do click the WhatsApp link in the description below. And let us know if you have any questions that you would like us to answer in the next roundup or in the next conversations that we have with founders. Until then, have a great week ahead, and we'll see you again next Sunday.
Hey, before that, I mean, if you guys are interested in an offline meetup, let us know in the comments or reach out to us on Twitter, etc. We'd love to arrange an offline meetup sometime.
Yeah. If you get the beer, we'll get the chips.